Hi, Mike DeLisio here. Today I'm going to be doing a review for The City of Kings from designer Frank West and publisher City of Games. City of Kings is an adventure game where you can either play as a story-driven campaign or single one-off scenarios. I'm going to be talking primarily today about the solo experience and giving you my impressions on whether this is a game that solo gamers should be interested in. So, the first thing I'd like to do is just give you a little basic overview of the game. I'm certainly not going to be going into heavy detail there. And then I'd like to come back and talk to you about my general experiences as a solo gamer. So, let's head on over to the table and take a look. Okay, so here we have what would be a typical setup for a solo game. The way the game works is that you've got a number of different stories that you could potentially play as. And each of these stories is going to have a setup that is specific to it, or you can do these one-off scenarios. So for example, this is set up for this scenario here, which is called Carry Our Prayers, okay? And in this particular scenario, it's a build type scenario, and it tells you the type of difficulty. What I'd be trying to do, and there's a lot of lovely flavor text here that kind of explains the backstory behind it, but really my objective in this particular scenario is to build the House of the Eastern Wind and the Shrine of the Hidden Sun to phase 3, okay? And so that represents two tiles that are already visible to me. The Shrine of the Hidden Sun is here, the House of the Eastern Wind is here, and what I'm trying to do is collect resources, in this case fish, to be able to build these to their third phase. So, for example, I would need to collect 3 fish and bring them back to the City of Kings so that I can dump them in the old barn here to be able to upgrade this tile from a phase 1 to a phase 2. And then for this one, I would have to get 5 fish, and I would then be able to upgrade it to the phase 3, okay? So the objective of this particular scenario is to be able to get this to phase 3 and this to phase 3. This scenario card will also give an idea of where each tile should be, if they're face up, or where the face down randomized tiles are going to go, and which types of tiles to go where. It also will give you the basic setup for the stats for your heroes and your workers, and get you basically all set up to play the game. And so, for example, in this case, I'd be trying to build those things up. Here are my heroes. I've chosen Calamus Earthshaker here, who is represented by this lovely miniature, and Valyria Elion, who is represented by this lovely miniature. And I do want to point out that in the base game, those are standees, but if you get the hero pack, you can get these wonderful miniatures to kind of add to the immersion in the game. So what you can do is take a number of actions. Each character is going to have 4 action markers that they can utilize. And so the round marker works pretty simply. You move first of all, you would resolve any story elements if there were any. In the first turn, there will not be. You move the time tracker forward because this is your timer, basically, to keep track of how many turns you have until the end of the game. And then you take your turns. And so different actions are available depending on whether you're using your hero or your worker. And so your heroes can move, explore, attack and heal, special actions, and they can do interacts. Your workers can move, explore, and work. And so they're essentially going to be doing different things. Your heroes are going to be, generally speaking, doing more of the dealing with any creatures that come up, and your workers are generally going to be doing most of the gathering, things along those lines to get the resources you need to fulfill your scenario. So let's say, for example, I wanted to move. I could move my Earthshaker onto this spot, and then maybe I want to explore and see what's underneath this tile. So I flip it over, and this tells me that it is a resource. Cogshead works. I can gather in this location to try to get stone. And so if I have my worker over here, which I could do, let's say I moved my worker one spot, and now he could work, which in this case on this tile would be to gathering stone, which could then be kept in his little area, which could then be brought back to the old barn. Now, why would you want to gather stone in this scenario when there's fish? Well, sometimes you're going to need stone to build different equipment like this Wizard's Bane would take some stone, some wood, and some other elements as well. You also might have a quest that pops up that might have you gathering things. So all of these tiles are going to have different elements to them. Some of them, this is a quest, for example, so if you explored that, you'd flip over the quest. In this case, the Giant's Moan, and your objective would be to place a strong fire token on your current location, and you'd get a particular reward for that if you were able to do so. There are also going to be creatures that could pop up. Oh, there's one right there, I looked out. The Vestian's Curse, this would bring up a creature, and so then what you would do if a creature came out is you would just choose one of these creature tiles, and it doesn't necessarily matter. They're all work kind of the same, and you would find the corresponding banner and you'd place it on that spot to represent that that creature is there. And now you're going to find out what particular elements you have to deal with this creature. You would take one of these stat bars. The first creature would have your number 1 stat bar, and it's going to give you a little bit of information. It's got 3 health. So you take a little cube and you put it on the 3 health. It takes 3 damage to defeat it. This also gives you some other elements. It has a cure of 1. It attacks for 1. It attacks all for 1. It's got a range of 2, and it gives you 2 XP if you can defeat it. The thing that is really interesting is that it also has a ability that gets randomly chosen out of a particular bag. In this case, there's 1 green dot. So we would go here to the easy bag. There are also medium and hard, and we would just randomly pick out an ability out of this bag, and now this creature has the ability of Poison Bolt, all right, which is an ability that would trigger on the turn of the player who triggered it. So if, let's say that Calamus here was the one that had turned over this tile, and he was the one that had exposed this creature, he would have it in his player area, and he would have to deal with this creature, and it now has a particular ability. All of these, again, are randomized, and it changes the way that you have to deal with the different creatures. And so, essentially what you're doing is moving across the world here, flipping over tiles, trying to gather resources if it's a resource gathering mission, trying to defeat creatures if it's a fighting type of scenario, because some scenarios are based more on fighting than on building or on gathering. And so you're just trying to achieve your objective without losing time or without losing your life, because if you lose your life, you lose morale. And if you lose too much morale, you lose. If you go around to midnight, you lose hope. And if you lose too much hope, then you lose. All right, so you have a couple of different ways to lose, and the way you win is going to be dependent upon whatever scenario you choose. And so that essentially is how it works. There is also quite a bit more as far as leveling up. So you can get some XP, and these XP will allow you, in some cases, to increase your stats. So maybe you can move the range of one of your heroes up or increase their attack value. You can also get these discs, which will allow you to gain different, actually this color should be over here, you can gain different types of special stats, and you could even get more of these skills that can come into your player area that you can eventually build your way up to if you had gained enough resources. You have to start at the bottom and work orthogonally from there, but you can eventually move up and get access to some of these either passive resources or maybe, passive skills, or maybe some special skills which you can use your special action token to be able to use. And so that just gives you a general idea of how the game of City of Kings is played. Obviously, depending on the scenario you're playing, that may change things a little bit. And if you're playing in a story, it's going to have more of an overarching narrative that you have to keep in mind for. But generally speaking, that's the gameplay of City of Kings. Okay, so hopefully you got a bit of an idea on how the City of Kings is played. I want to reiterate that I gave you a very high-level overview of the game. I did not go into much detail at all because I'm not sure that's really what you're going to be looking for in a review. But I did want you to have a bit of an idea of how it worked so that maybe some of the comments that I make will have a little bit more context. And so I want to first start talking about setup and teardown. Now, this is something that I think is primarily important in a solo game because you're playing by yourself. Are you going to have that motivation to take this game out and get it all set up? Well, The positives on this aspect of the game is that it is tremendously well explained as far as how you set the game up. These scenario cards that I showed a little bit earlier, they tell you exactly what you need to know. So there's never been any ambiguity when I've been setting a game up. I know exactly what tiles I need to get. I know where they need to go. I know where I need to set up all my stats. That's great, because that's not always been the case with these larger games. There are some games where I really feel, am I doing this right? Am I missing something here? I've never had that problem with the City of Kings, so that's a big positive. One thing that I think is a bit of a drawback is that it's a bit of a table hog. Just as a solo game, you're going to be taking up most of a large size table because these character sheets are gigantic. And while I understand that there's a practical reason for that, because you want to have room for all of your stats, perhaps some of it could have been a little bit scaled down. I don't know. I don't mind it because I like having it all in front of me, but I do know that there are going to be some people that are going to take issue with the amount of table space that it takes up just as a solo game. The other thing to keep in mind is that this is a bit of a lengthy game to set up. It's not something you're going to open up the box and be playing within 5 minutes. Even with the lovely trays that I got as part of an upgrade kit, it still is a little bit of a time to set the game up. So that's something you're going to want to keep in mind. If you're playing a story scenario a story campaign where you're going to have it up on your table over a series of days, then it's probably not a big issue. But for a one-off scenario, that might be something to keep in mind. Next, I want to talk about art and components. The positives here are that I think the art is tremendous. From the box cover, which I think is incredibly striking and beautiful, to the character art, to the art on the tiles, the player sheets, I think that the art is wonderful. Now, that's obviously a subjective thing, but in my taste, it fits very well. I really like the art. It draws me in. It makes me want to explore it even further. The cards are good quality. These tiles are very good quality. No complaints there. The cubes, all the wooden bits are of fine quality. The drawbacks as far as art and components go is that some might feel that the upgrade kit is almost a necessity. So what is the upgrade kit? Generally speaking, it is you get these nice plastic over sheets. Actually, I don't know if those are part of the upgrade kit itself, but it is an upgrade you can get for the game. If you bump the table and don't have that, it can certainly be an issue. These trays that help the setup, that's very, very helpful, and some might feel like it should be part of the regular game. The components, the wooden components, the wood and the food, it's lovely. If you don't have the upgrade kit, it's just tokens, and the tokens are fine. Quite honestly, I don't feel like the wooden components are necessary at all. They're nice, don't get me wrong, and they kind of add to the immersion, but they're certainly not necessary. The next thing, win-loss conditions. I think as a solo gamer, a lot of times you want to know, is there a clear win-loss condition, or am I playing for a high score? Well, this is a pure co-op, and so there are clear win-loss conditions. It's always very clear, what do I need to do? What are my objectives? How much time do I have? What do I have to get done? I either make it or I don't. No ambiguity there. It's something that as a solo gamer I'm always looking for, and City of Kings has a clear win-loss condition. Finally, the overall solo experience. Do I feel like this is a good solo experience? Yes or no? Well, positives. First of all is that I feel like City of Kings gives an epic experience in a reasonable time frame. And that's not easy to pull off. I feel like when I have finished even a one-off scenario, I really feel like I have either accomplished something or failed miserably. It feels epic. It feels like there's a lot that I'm doing. There's a lot I'm accomplishing. I'm gathering resources, I'm fighting creatures, I'm solving puzzles, and that's something that you don't always get in these adventure type games, is puzzle elements, and that's in spades here. I love the creature abilities. Now, this is something that I've actually seen people have complained about. I've read complaints that you shouldn't have kind of generic, quote-unquote, creatures that don't differentiate from others other than the art. Well, to me, this is a brilliant, practical decision, because you can still, as a player, as a gamer, you can be a little bit responsible for injecting some theme into a game. City of Kings isn't asking you to do too much here. The Scorched, is this any different from Hudra's Horde? No, not really, other than the art. But as a gamer, as a player, I can inject that theme. And I like the fact that these stat tiles, and especially these creature abilities, what an intelligent way to add a randomized element, so that although this is not necessarily different than anything else, once you add those abilities on, yeah, now it is. It interacts differently. You have to use different strategies to be able to be successful. I think that is brilliant. And so what I've read as a negative for some people, to me, is a huge positive. I love the way the creatures are handled in this game. Another thing that I think is a positive as a solo gamer is that I personally like games that have puzzle elements to them. I think a lot of solo gamers do. And this is a game that, if you just were to look at it, would not necessarily think of it as a puzzle type game, but it really is. A lot of times these creatures are not something you're just going to be able to run up and bash at. That's not going to work in many cases. You have to puzzle it out. You have to figure out, okay, do I want to directly interact with this creature, or do I want to get out of its line of sight so that I could maybe go here on this quest and build up some of my stats and XP so that I can maybe come back at it with a new element, a new skill, a stronger attack ability or a stronger heal ability? Or do I want to differentiate my characters in such a way that one is focusing more on healing while the other one is more of kind of the armor and tank and that type of a thing? And so I like that you can really use some puzzling elements. And there are times in this game where I thought, there's no way I'm going to be able to do this, and I just came up with a different thought, and boom, there you have it. The one negative I think I can find in the solo experience is that to be able to play it as a solo game, you do have to have at least 2 characters. And so for some people, that's a big negative. They don't like having to control 2 different characters. They'd rather be able to do it with one. There are some games where that does bother me. It doesn't bother me too much in the City of Kings, because just the way the game is played, you kind of need to have characters that can, as I just mentioned a moment ago, they can differentiate a little bit and have one focusing maybe on one part of armor or attack, and the other focusing maybe more on healing or things along those lines. It's almost necessary in this game. And so while it might be a negative overall, in this game it's not going to bother me too much. But I did want to mention it because it might be something you want to consider. So overall, I think the City of Kings is a really wonderful game. It was one of my top solo games of 2018. I continue to play it. I continue to enjoy it. With the additions of these new kind of allies, oops, knocking things over there. With the additions of these new allies and new characters, it's adding new elements to the game that change things up just enough while still keeping the core element of the game. So there you have it, the City of Kings. If this looks like something you'd be interested in, I would certainly recommend that you give it a look. Thank you so much for your time, as always, and have a great day.
Thanks so much for watching the Dice Tower videos. Find more great videos and reviews, as well as our top-rated audio podcast at Dicetower.com.